What would you do if you were rushing through an airport, barely making ends meet, when you stumbled upon two frightened little girls crying in a corner? What if they had nowhere to go, no one to call, and their story seemed impossible to believe? What if helping them meant risking everything you had left, including the custody of your own child? This is the story of Marcus Chen, a janitor working double shifts at Denver International Airport, whose life changed forever when compassion collided with destiny on the busiest travel day of the year. It's a tale about kindness that costs everything, but gives back infinitely more, about connections that defy logic, and how sometimes the smallest acts of courage can unlock the most extraordinary miracles. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. So if you believe that love has no boundaries, that family is built through actions, not accidents, and that sometimes angels come disguised as strangers in need, you've found the right story. Denver International Airport hummed with its usual chaos on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the kind of controlled pandemonium that Marcus Chen had grown accustomed to over his 3 years of working the night shift. Travelers dragged oversized suitcases across polished floors, their faces etched with the particular blend of exhaustion and determination that came with holiday travel. The fluorescent lights cast everything in a harsh clinical glow, making even the cheerful holiday decorations look tired and worn. Marcus pushed his cleaning cart down Concourse B, his worn sneakers squeaking against the marble floor with each step. At 34, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had learned to find purpose in work that others overlooked. His uniform was always pressed despite being secondhand, his name tag polished, and his smile genuine even when his body ached from pulling 16-hour shifts. The early morning hours were his favorite part of the job when the airport settled into a quieter rhythm and he could work without dodging stressed passengers or dodging judgment about his circumstances. He paused near Gate B47, checking his watch. 4:30 in the morning. In 2 hours he would clock out, drive his battered Honda Civic across town to pick up his 7-year-old son Tommy from his ex-wife's apartment, and then somehow stay awake long enough to make the boy breakfast and get him to school. It was a routine that left Marcus perpetually exhausted, but filled with quiet determination. Every mop bucket emptied, every trash can lined, every floor polished was another step toward stability for his son. As he rounded the corner toward the family restroom area, something caught his attention. A soft sound, barely audible above the hum of the airport's ventilation system. Crying, not the frustrated wails of an overtired toddler, or the dramatic sobs of a teenager missing a flight, but something quieter, more desperate. The kind of crying that came from deep exhaustion and genuine fear. Marcus set down his spray bottle and listened more carefully. The sound was coming from behind a cluster of chairs near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the tarmac. He walked over slowly, not wanting to startle whoever was there, and found them. 2 little girls, probably no older than 8, huddled together on the carpeted floor between the chairs and the wall. They were identical twins with dark hair that hung in tangled waves around their shoulders, wearing matching purple sweaters that looked expensive but were now wrinkled and stained. Their faces were red and blotchy from crying, their eyes swollen with exhaustion. A small pink backpack sat beside them, its contents spilling out onto the floor, papers, a few snacks, and what looked like boarding passes scattered around them. Marcus crouched down slowly, keeping his distance so he wouldn't frighten them. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice carrying the gentle tone he used with Tommy when the boy had nightmares. "Are you girls okay? Are you hurt?" The twin on the left looked up first, her brown eyes wide and filled with tears. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old, but there was something in her expression that spoke of burdens far too heavy for someone her age. She nudged her sister, who lifted her head slowly, revealing the same heart-shaped face and exhausted eyes. "We're lost," the first girl whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "We can't find our mommy." Marcus felt his heart clench. He glanced around the concourse, but it was nearly empty except for a few maintenance workers in the distance and a lone security guard walking his rounds. "When did you last see her? Do you remember where?" The second twin spoke up, her voice slightly stronger than her sister's. "She put us on the airplane, but then she didn't come. The flight people said we had to get off and wait, but nobody came to get us." Marcus sat down cross-legged on the floor, bringing himself to their eye level. Something about their story didn't add up, but right now that mattered less than the fact that two small children were alone and scared in one of the busiest airports in the country. "What are your names, sweethearts?" "I'm Sophia," said the first girl, pointing to herself. "And this is Isabella. We're twins. Nice to meet you both. I'm Marcus." He smiled warmly. "And I work here at the airport. Can you tell me your mommy's name? Maybe we can call her." Isabella shook her head vigorously. "She's not answering her phone. We tried and tried, but it just makes the beeping sound." Sophia reached into the pink backpack and pulled out a cell phone, its screen cracked and battery indicator showing red. It stopped working after we called so many times. Marcus examined the phone gently. It was an expensive model, definitely not a child's toy phone. The crack across the screen looked recent, and when he tried to turn it on, nothing happened. Dead battery, most likely. "Do you remember your mommy's phone number? Maybe we could try calling from a different phone." The girls exchanged a look that seemed far too adult for their age. "We only know how to press the button that says Mommy," Sophia admitted. "She never taught us the number with all the digits." This was becoming more complicated by the minute. Marcus looked at the scattered boarding passes on the floor and gathered them up. The flights listed were from various cities, all arriving in Denver the previous day. But the names on the passes were different from what the girls had told him their mother's name was. In fact, the passes seemed to belong to different people entirely. "Girls, these boarding passes. Do you know where these came from?" Isabella's lower lip began to tremble again. "The airplane people gave them to us when Mommy didn't come. They said someone would come get us, but nobody did. We waited and waited, and then they told us to go with another lady, but she was scary, and we ran away." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This was sounding less like a simple case of a delayed parent and more like something much more serious. "Scary how, sweetheart?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "She kept asking us questions about Mommy's work and where we live and stuff we don't know," Sophia said, wrapping her arms around her knees. "And she had this look in her eyes like the mean teacher at our old school." Marcus's mind raced. These girls were clearly in some kind of trouble, possibly serious trouble, and they had somehow ended up alone in the airport for what sounded like hours, maybe even overnight. He needed to get them help, but he also knew that involving airport security might mean the girls would be swept into a system that could separate them or worse. "Listen, girls, I want to help you find your mommy, okay? But first, are you hungry? When was the last time you ate something?" Both girls perked up slightly at the mention of food. "Yesterday," Isabella said. "On the airplane, they gave us peanuts, but they were salty and made us more thirsty." Marcus checked his watch again. His shift would be over in less than 2 hours, but there was no way he could just clock out and leave these children here. He made a decision that would change everything. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I know a quiet place in the airport where we can sit and talk, and I'll get you some food and something to drink. Then we'll figure out how to find your mommy. Does that sound good?" The relief on their faces was immediate and heartbreaking. "You're not going to leave us?" Sophia asked, her voice small. "I'm not going to leave you," Marcus promised, and he meant it completely. He helped them gather their belongings, noting that aside from the backpack, they had no luggage, which was odd for children who had supposedly been on a flight. The backpack contained a few snacks, some coloring books, 2 small stuffed animals. That looked well loved, and a manila envelope that was sealed shut. Marcus led them through the quieter corridors of the airport to the employee break room in the basement level. It was a small, windowless room with a few tables, some vending machines, and a microwave that had seen better days, but it was private and warm. He settled the girls at a table in the corner and bought them hot chocolate from the vending machine and some crackers from his own lunch. As they ate, Marcus studied them more carefully. Despite their ordeal, there was something about these children that struck him as unusual. Their clothes, while rumpled, were clearly expensive. Their shoes were designer brands. Even their backpack and stuffed animals showed quality that spoke of a family with significant means. Yet they had been abandoned in an airport with no clear way to contact their mother. "Can you tell me more about your mommy?" he asked gently. "What does she do for work?" The twins exchanged another one of those loaded glances. "She travels a lot," Isabella said carefully. "She's always on airplanes going to meetings." "She has lots of meetings with important people," Sophia added. "She wears fancy clothes and talks on the phone all the time." "And where do you live when she's not traveling?" "Lots of places," Isabella said. "Sometimes we stay with Mrs. Rodriguez, sometimes with Grandma Elena, sometimes in hotels." This was painting a picture of a lifestyle that Marcus couldn't quite piece together. A mother who traveled constantly, children who moved between caregivers, expensive possessions, but no permanent address that the children could clearly articulate. He was beginning to suspect that these girls came from a complicated family situation, possibly involving divorce, custody issues, or worse. "Girls, this might sound like a strange question, but do you know your mommy's last name, your last name?" Sophia tilted her head. "We're Sophia and Isabella Delacruz. Mommy is Catherine Delacroix, but sometimes people call her other names when they're talking about work." The name Delacroix struck Marcus as vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place where he might have heard it. "And do you know what kind of work your mommy does? What kind of meetings she goes to?" "Airplane meetings," Isabella said matter-of-factly. "She talks to people about airplanes and flying and stuff. She says she helps people get where they need to go." Marcus felt something click in the back of his mind, but before he could pursue the thought further, his radio crackled to life. It was his supervisor, calling for all janitorial staff to report to the main office. He glanced at his watch and realized his shift was supposed to end in 30 minutes. "Girls, I need to check in with my boss really quickly. I'm going to lock this door so you'll be safe in here, and I'll be back in just a few minutes, okay? You promise you'll come back?" Sophia asked, her eyes wide with fear. "I promise. And here," he handed Isabella his ID badge. "You hold on to this. That way you know I have to come back to get it." The trip to the supervisor's office was quick but tense. Marcus explained that he had found 2 lost children and was trying to help them locate their guardian. His supervisor, a tired man named Rodriguez who had been with the airport for 15 years, listened with growing concern. "Marcus, you know you can't just take random kids to the employee break room. If something happens to them while they're in an unauthorized area, you could lose your job, and the airport could face serious liability." "I understand that, but these girls were alone for hours, possibly all night. They're scared and hungry, and something about their situation doesn't feel right. I think they might be in some kind of danger." Rodriguez rubbed his forehead. "Look, I get that you want to help, but we have protocols for this. You need to contact airport security and let them handle it." "What if airport security isn't the right answer? What if whoever is supposed to be watching these girls is the problem?" It was a fair question, and Rodriguez knew it. Denver International had dealt with its share of trafficking cases, custody disputes, and other situations where children's safety was at risk. Sometimes the official channels weren't always the safest option. Okay, here's what we'll do. You've got 2 hours of sick time you can use. Take it now, and use that time to figure out what's going on with these kids. But Marcus, if you can't resolve this quickly, you have to involve the authorities. I can't protect you beyond that. Marcus nodded gratefully and headed back to the break room, his mind racing with possibilities. When he opened the door, he found the twins exactly where he had left them, but they had opened the manila envelope and were staring at its contents with confusion. "What did you find?" he asked, sitting down beside them. Sophia held up a stack of papers. "We don't know what these are, but they have Mommy's name on them." Marcus examined the documents carefully. They appeared to be legal papers, contracts or agreements of some kind, but the language was dense and technical. What caught his attention immediately was the letterhead at the top of each page, Delacroix Aviation Holdings. The name hit him like a lightning bolt. Catherine Delacroix. Delacroix Aviation. Now he remembered where he had heard that name before. Catherine Delacroix was the CEO and owner of one of the largest private aviation companies in North America. Her company owned hundreds of aircraft, from small private jets to large commercial planes that were leased to major airlines. She was frequently mentioned in business news, often photographed at industry events, and was known for being both brilliantly successful and intensely private about her personal life. If these girls were telling the truth, if they really were Catherine Delacroix's daughters, then they weren't just lost children. They were the daughters of one of the most powerful women in the aviation industry, alone and frightened in an airport that her mother's company probably had business relationships with. "Girls," Marcus said carefully, "I think I know who your mommy is. She's very important, isn't she? She owns airplane companies?" Isabella nodded eagerly. "She owns lots and lots of airplanes. She showed us pictures once of all the different ones, and she said someday we could fly in all of them. But lately, she's been really busy and worried about something," Sophia added, her voice growing sad. "She talks on the phone late at night, and sometimes she cries when she thinks we're sleeping." Marcus felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. If Catherine Delacroix's daughters were missing, there would already be people looking for them. Security teams, possibly law enforcement, maybe even federal agents depending on the circumstances. The fact that these girls had been alone in the airport for hours suggested that something had gone seriously wrong. "Can you tell me exactly what happened yesterday? Start from the beginning, when you woke up." The story that emerged was fragmentary but troubling. The girls remembered being at a hotel with their mother, who had been on multiple phone calls and seemed upset about something. They remembered her packing quickly and telling them they needed to go to the airport right away. Once there, Catherine had put them on a plane but had told them she would meet them when they landed in Denver. "But she never came," Isabella said, her voice breaking. "We waited and waited, and the airplane people kept making phone calls, but nobody could find her. And then the scary lady came and said she was supposed to take us somewhere, but she didn't know our middle names or our favorite colors or anything a friend of Mommy's would know," Sophia continued. Marcus was beginning to piece together a picture that made his stomach turn. It sounded like Catherine Delacroix had put her daughters on a plane in some kind of emergency situation, possibly to get them away from something or someone dangerous. When she failed to appear at the destination, someone else had tried to claim the children, someone who didn't know them well enough to answer basic questions that any genuine caregiver would know. The girls had been smart enough to run, but now they were stuck in limbo, too young to navigate the airport system on their own, but too frightened to trust the adults who were supposed to help them. "Girls, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Do you trust me?" Both girls nodded without hesitation. "Good, because I think your mommy might be in trouble, and I think someone might be trying to take you away from her." But I also think I can help you get back to her safely. Do you want me to try?" "Yes," they said in unison, and the hope in their voices broke Marcus's heart. Marcus looked at his watch. His borrowed time was running out, and he had a decision to make. He could turn the girls over to airport security and hope that the system would protect them, or he could trust his instincts and try to help them himself. Given what he suspected about their situation, the official channels might not be safe. He thought about his own son, Tommy, who would be waiting for him in a few hours. What would he want someone to do if Tommy were alone and scared, and the people who were supposed to help him couldn't be trusted? The answer was obvious. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to take you somewhere safe where we can try to figure out how to contact your mommy. But we're going to have to be very careful and very quiet. Can you do that?" The twins nodded solemnly, and Marcus began to formulate a plan that would either save these children or cost him everything he had worked so hard to build. As they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave the break room, Marcus caught sight of his reflection in the small mirror near the door. He looked tired, worried, and completely out of his depth. But he also looked determined. Whatever was happening to Catherine Delacroix and her daughters, whatever forces had conspired to separate this family, Marcus Chen was going to do everything in his power to make it right, even if it meant risking his job, his custody arrangement. With Tommy, and possibly his freedom, he couldn't walk away from two frightened children who had no one else to trust. Sometimes doing the right thing meant accepting consequences that you couldn't predict or control. As they slipped quietly out of the employee area and into the service corridors of the airport, Marcus whispered a prayer to whatever forces might be listening. He was about to step into a situation that was far bigger and more complicated than anything he had ever dealt with before. But as he looked down at Sophia and Isabella, their small hands trustingly placed in his, he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The real story was just beginning. Marcus led the twins through the maze of service corridors beneath Denver International Airport, his keycard opening doors that most travelers never knew existed. The underground passages were a different world entirely, lined with concrete walls and fluorescent lighting that hummed constantly overhead. The air smelled of industrial cleaning supplies and the faint diesel exhaust from the baggage carts that rumbled through these tunnels at all hours. Sophia and Isabella walked close beside him, their small hands clutching the straps of the pink backpack between them. They had been quiet since leaving the break room, their eyes wide as they took in this hidden side of the airport. Marcus could feel their trust in him like a physical weight, and it both strengthened his resolve and terrified him in equal measure. "Where are we going?" Isabella whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the narrow corridor. "Somewhere safe where we can figure out how to find your mommy," Marcus replied, though he wasn't entirely sure himself. His mind was racing through options, none of them particularly good. He needed somewhere with internet access, a phone, and privacy. Most importantly, he needed somewhere that airport security wouldn't think to look if they started searching for the girls. They emerged from the service area into the employee parking garage, a vast concrete cavern filled with the cars of airport workers. Marcus's Honda Civic sat in its usual spot near the back, looking tired but reliable. As they approached the car, he realized that taking the girls off airport property represented a point of no return. Once he left with them, he would be fully committed to whatever consequences might follow. "Girls, I need to take you away from the airport for a little while. Is that okay with you?" Sophia looked up at him with those serious brown eyes that seemed far too mature for her age. "Are you kidnapping us?" The question was so direct and unexpected that Marcus stopped walking. He knelt down so he was at their eye level, his hands resting gently on their shoulders. "No, sweetheart. I'm trying to help you get back to your mommy safely, but I understand why you would ask that question. You've been through something scary and you don't really know me. But you gave us food and you didn't ask weird questions like the scary lady," Isabella said. And you have kind eyes like Mrs. Rodriguez. Who's Mrs. Rodriguez? She takes care of us sometimes when Mommy travels. She makes the best pancakes, and she always knows when we're sad, even when we don't say anything. Marcus felt a pang in his chest. These children had clearly been through more upheaval than any 8-year-old should have to endure. I promise you that everything I'm doing is to help you get back to the people who love you. But if you don't want to come with me, we can go back inside and find another way. The twins looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that only close siblings could manage. Finally, Sophia nodded. We'll come with you. But can you promise us something? What's that? If you can't find Mommy, will you take us to Mrs. Rodriguez? Her full name is Maria Rodriguez, and she lives in a blue house with white flowers. Marcus smiled despite the gravity of the situation. I promise. Now let's get going. The drive through Denver's early morning traffic gave Marcus time to think. The twins sat in the back seat, sharing a bag of crackers he had grabbed from his lunch and talking quietly to each other. Every few minutes, one of them would ask a question about where they were going or comment on something they saw out the window, but mostly they seemed content to trust his judgment. Marcus had decided to take them to his apartment, which wasn't ideal but was the only place he could think of where they would be completely safe while he tried to figure out their situation. His apartment was small and cluttered, hardly suitable for children, but it had internet access and privacy, and more importantly, it was a place where no one would think to look for them. As they pulled into the parking lot of his building, a modest complex that had seen better days, Marcus felt a wave of self-consciousness about his living situation. He had been so focused on making his child support payments and saving money for Tommy's future that he had spent very little on making his own space comfortable. The apartment was clean but sparse, furnished mostly with secondhand pieces and lacking any of the warmth that would make it feel like a real home. This is where you live? Sophia asked as they climbed the stairs to the second floor. It's not much, but it's quiet and safe, Marcus replied. Unlocking the door to apartment 2B, the girl stepped inside and looked around with curious eyes. The living room contained a worn couch, a small television, and a folding table that served as both desk and dining area. The kitchen was tiny but functional, separated from the living room by a breakfast bar with 2 mismatched stools. What? The apartment lacked in style. It made up for in cleanliness and order. It's nice, Isabella said politely. It's not too big and scary like some of the hotel rooms. Marcus felt an unexpected warmth at her words. He had always been self-conscious about his modest living situation, especially when it came to the custody evaluations for Tommy. But seeing it through the eyes of these girls, who seemed to value safety and comfort over luxury, gave him a different perspective. Are you hungry? I can make some breakfast while we figure out what to do next. Both girls perked up at the mention of food. Marcus realized that despite the crackers and hot chocolate from earlier, they probably hadn't had a proper meal in quite some time. He rummaged through his refrigerator and pantry, coming up with eggs, bread, and some frozen hash browns that were only slightly freezer burned. As he cooked, the twins explored the apartment with the careful curiosity of children who had learned not to touch things without permission. They gravitated toward a small bookshelf in the corner where Marcus kept his collection of paperback novels and a few framed photographs. Is this your little boy? Sophia asked, holding up a picture of Tommy from his last birthday party. Marcus glanced over from the stove. That's my son, Tommy. He's 7 years old. He looks nice. Does he live here with you? The question hit Marcus harder than he expected. Sometimes. He lives with his mommy most of the time, but he stays with me on weekends and some evenings. Isabella joined her sister by the bookshelf. Do you miss him when he's not here? Every day, Marcus admitted, his voice catching slightly. But that's what happens sometimes when families change. The important thing is that he knows I love him. The twins exchanged another one of their meaningful looks. Our family changed too, Sophia said quietly. Mommy says sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices to keep the people they love safe. Marcus plated the eggs and hash browns, adding some toast that was only slightly burnt around the edges. As they ate, he gently encouraged the girls to tell him more about their mother and their life before yesterday's events. The picture that emerged was both fascinating and troubling. Catherine Delacroix, according to her daughters, was a brilliant but driven woman who had built her aviation empire through a combination of business acumen and sheer determination. She traveled constantly for work, often taking red-eye flights and working 18-hour days. The girls spent much of their time with various caregivers, though it was clear that Catherine tried to be present for important moments in their lives. She always comes to our school plays and our dance recitals, Isabella explained, even if she has to fly back from really faraway places. And she reads to us every night when she's home, Sophia added. Even if she's really tired, she always reads at least one story. But recently, things had changed. Catherine had been more stressed, more secretive. She had received phone calls at all hours that made her face go pale and her voice get sharp. She had hired new security people and had started asking the girls unusual questions about whether anyone had approached them at school or tried to talk to them. She kept telling us that if anything ever happened to her, we should find someone. We trusted and give them the envelope, Sophia said, pointing to the manila envelope that now sat on Marcus's kitchen counter. Marcus had been avoiding looking too closely at the contents of the envelope, partly because it felt like an invasion of privacy, and partly because he suspected that whatever was inside would only complicate an already complex situation. But now, with the girls' permission, he spread the documents out on his kitchen table. The papers were a mixture of legal documents, financial records, and what appeared to be correspondence between Catherine Delacroix and various business associates. Marcus was no lawyer, but even his untrained eye could see that something significant was happening in Catherine's business world. There were references to hostile takeovers, corporate espionage, and threats that seemed to go beyond normal business. Competition. One document in particular caught his attention. It was a letter from a law firm representing something called the Morrison Group, demanding that Catherine turn over control of certain aviation routes and aircraft leases. The language was formal, but the underlying threat was clear: comply or face consequences that would extend beyond the business world. Girls, do you know anything about the Morrison Group? Has your mommy ever mentioned that name? Both twins shook their heads, but Isabella added, there were some men who came to our hotel once. Mommy sent us to our room, but we could hear her talking to them in the living room. She sounded really mad, and after they left, she made lots of phone calls. Do you remember what these men looked like? They wore dark suits and they didn't smile, Sophia said. And one of them had a scar on his face like this. She drew a line down her cheek with her finger. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This was sounding less like a business dispute and more like something that belonged in a crime thriller. If Catherine Delacroix had gotten involved with people who were willing to use intimidation and possibly violence to get what they wanted, then her daughters could be in real danger. He was beginning to understand why Catherine had put the girls on a plane and why she might not have been able to meet them at their destination. If she was being threatened or if something had happened to her, then the safest thing she could do would be to get her daughters as far away as possible from whatever situation she was dealing with. But that raised another troubling question. If Catherine was in trouble, how was Marcus supposed to contact her? And if the people who were threatening her business were also willing to target her children, then keeping Sophia and Isabella safe might be more complicated than he had initially thought. As if reading his thoughts, Isabella looked up from her breakfast with worried eyes. Mr. Marcus, do you think something bad happened to Mommy? Marcus chose his words carefully. I think your mommy is very smart and very strong, and I think she sent you away because she wanted to make sure you were safe. Sometimes grown-ups have to deal with difficult things, and the best way they can protect their children is to make sure they're not around when those difficult things are happening. But how will she find us if we're not where she told us to be? Sophia asked. It was a fair question, and Marcus didn't have a good answer. He had essentially kidnapped two children from an airport and brought them to his apartment, with no clear plan for reuniting them with their mother. If Catherine Delacroix was looking for her daughters, she would expect to find them at the airport or in the custody of airport authorities. By taking them away, Marcus might have actually made the situation worse. Let me make some phone calls and see what I can find out, he said. In the meantime, why don't you girls see if there's anything on television that you'd like to watch? Marcus retreated to his bedroom with his laptop and cell phone, leaving the door open so he could keep an eye on the twins. His first instinct was to search for news about Catherine Delacroix, and what he found made his stomach drop. The headlines were everywhere. Aviation mogul Catherine Delacroix missing. Federal investigation into Delacroix Aviation Holdings. CEO disappears amid corporate takeover battle. The articles painted a picture of a woman who had been under intense pressure from business rivals and who had vanished sometime Tuesday evening, less than 24 hours ago. According to the news reports, Catherine had been scheduled to attend a board meeting Tuesday night, but had never arrived. Her security team had found her hotel room empty, with signs of a hasty departure, but no indication of violence. Her company's stock price had plummeted overnight, and federal investigators were treating her disappearance as potentially related to the ongoing investigation into her business practices. Most troubling of all, several articles mentioned that Catherine's twin daughters were also missing and that authorities were concerned for their safety. There was even a photo of Sophia and Isabella, clearly taken from a school event or family gathering, with a caption asking anyone with information about their whereabouts to contact law enforcement immediately. Marcus stared at the photo on his laptop screen, then looked through his bedroom door at the two girls who were curled up together on his couch, watching cartoons and sharing a blanket. They had no idea that their faces were currently plastered across news websites and that teams of investigators were searching for them. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to call the number provided in the news articles and turn the girls over to the authorities immediately. But something about the situation still didn't feel right to Marcus. If Catherine Delacroix had put her daughters on a plane to get them away from danger, and if someone at the airport had tried to claim them using false credentials, then the people threatening Catherine might have infiltrated the very systems that were supposed to protect her children. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from his ex-wife Janet. "Where are you? Tommy is asking for you." He had completely forgotten that he was supposed to pick up Tommy this morning. He glanced at the clock and realized that he was already an hour late. This was exactly the kind of thing that could be used against him in their ongoing custody battle. Janet was already skeptical of his ability to provide stability for their son, and disappearing without explanation would only reinforce her concerns. He texted back quickly, "Emergency at work. Can you take Tommy to school? I'll explain later." The response came immediately. "This is unacceptable, Marcus. Tommy was counting on seeing you this morning. We need to talk." Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His life was falling apart in real time. He was harboring two missing children who were at the center of a federal investigation. He was missing his scheduled time with his son, and he had no clear plan for resolving any of these problems without potentially making everything worse. But when he looked at Sophia and Isabella, safe and warm in his living room, he knew he couldn't abandon them, not yet. Not until he was certain that turning them over to the authorities would actually keep them safe. He walked back into the living room and sat down on the couch beside the twins. "Girls, I need to tell you something. There are news stories on the internet about your mommy being missing, and about you two being missing as well. There are people looking for you." Both girls sat up straighter, their eyes wide with concern. "Are we in trouble?" Isabella asked. No, you're not in trouble. But the people who are looking for you might not all be people who want to help. Some of them might be the same people who were threatening your mommy. Sophia reached for the manila envelope. Mommy said if anything happened to her, we should give this to someone we trusted. She said it would help people understand what was really happening. Marcus looked at the documents spread across his kitchen table. I think your mommy wanted to make sure that if something happened to her, the truth would come out about what these bad people were trying to do to her company. So we should give it to the police? Isabella asked. Maybe, but first I think we need to figure out which police officers we can trust. Your mommy was very smart to be careful about who she told her secrets to. The twins nodded solemnly, as if this all made perfect sense to them. Marcus marveled at their resilience and their ability to adapt to circumstances that would terrify most adults. They had been through an experience that should have left them traumatized, yet they were handling everything with remarkable composure. As the morning wore on, Marcus found himself settling into an unexpected routine with the girls. They helped him wash the breakfast dishes, they told him stories about their school and their friends, and they asked thoughtful questions about his life and his work. It struck him how natural it felt to have children in his apartment, how much warmer and more alive the space seemed with their presence. Around noon, his phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but something about the timing made him nervous. He stepped into the kitchen before answering. Hello? Mr. Chen, this is Detective Sarah Williams with the Denver Police Department. I'm calling because your name came up in connection with our investigation into the disappearance of Catherine Delacroix and her daughters. I understand you work at the airport? Marcus's mouth went dry. Yes, I work for the janitorial service at VA. We're interviewing all airport employees who were working yesterday and this morning. Would you be available to come in for a brief conversation? Marcus looked through the kitchen doorway at Sophia and Isabella, who were building some kind of fort out of couch cushions and throw pillows. What exactly do you need to know? Just routine questions about whether you saw anything unusual, any unaccompanied children, any suspicious individuals. It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. The detective's tone was professional, but insistent. Marcus realized that refusing to cooperate would only make him look suspicious, but leaving the girls alone in his apartment was out of the question, and bringing them with him would immediately expose the fact that he had been harboring them. I'm actually not feeling well today, he said, hating himself for the lie. Food poisoning from something I ate last night. Could we schedule this for tomorrow instead? There was a pause. Mr. Chen, I hope you understand how serious this situation is. 2 young children are missing, and their mother may be in grave danger. Any information you might have, even if it seems insignificant, could be crucial to our investigation. I understand completely. If I had seen anything that could help find those little girls, I would have called immediately. But I'll be happy to come in tomorrow when I'm feeling better. After ending the call, Marcus sat down heavily at his kitchen table. The walls were closing in, and he was running out of time and options. The police knew his name, which meant they would likely follow up if he didn't appear for an interview. His supervisor at the airport would eventually realize that he had taken more time off than he was entitled to. And somewhere out there, the people who had threatened Catherine Delacroix were probably still looking for her daughters. Mr. Marcus, are you okay? Sophia's voice came from right beside him. She had approached so quietly that he hadn't heard her. I'm okay, sweetheart. Just thinking about how to help you and your sister. The lady on the phone was asking about us, wasn't she? Marcus looked down at her, once again struck by how perceptive these children were. How did you know that? Because you got that same worried look that Mommy gets when people call her about business things. And you kept looking at us while you were talking. Isabella appeared beside her sister. Are the police looking for us? Marcus nodded. Yes, they are. They want to make sure you're safe. But we are safe, Isabella said simply. We're safe with you. The trust in her voice was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. These girls had placed their faith in him completely, and he was beginning to realize that he might not be able to protect them from the forces that were converging around them. As the afternoon stretched on, Marcus found himself facing an impossible decision. He could continue to hide the girls and hope that somehow Catherine Delacreux would surface and reclaim them. But with each passing hour, the chances of that happening seemed to diminish. Or he could turn them over to the authorities and trust that the system would protect them, even though everything he had learned suggested that the system might have already been compromised. The decision was made for him when his phone rang again, this time with a call that would change everything. Hello? He answered cautiously. Is this Marcus Chen? The voice was female, urgent, and slightly breathless. Who's asking? My name is Catherine Delacreux. I believe you have my daughters. Marcus nearly dropped the phone. The voice on the other end was strained with exhaustion and what sounded like barely controlled panic, but there was an unmistakable authority in it that matched the image of the powerful businesswoman he had read about online. How did you get this number? He managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. That's not important right now. What matters is that my daughters are safe. Are they hurt? Are they scared? Marcus looked through the doorway at Sophia and Isabella, who had abandoned their fort-building project and were now sitting quietly on the couch, clearly sensing that something significant was happening. They're fine. They're safe. But Mrs. Delacroix, there are people looking for them. The police called me today. I know. Listen to me very carefully, Mr. Chen. I don't have much time, and I can't explain everything over the phone. The people who are after my company have resources inside law enforcement. If you turn my daughters over to the police, they won't be safe. Then what am I supposed to do? I can't keep them indefinitely. I have my own son to think about, my own life. There was a pause, and when Catherine spoke again, her voice was softer. I know what I'm asking of you is impossible. I know you didn't choose to get involved in this. But right now, you're the only person standing between my daughters and people who would use them to destroy everything I've built. Marcus sat down heavily at his kitchen table, the weight of the situation crushing down on him. Where are you? Why can't you come get them yourself? Because the moment I surface, they'll know where the girls are. I'm being watched, Mr. Chen. Every move I make is being monitored. The only reason I was able to get them away is because I had help from someone inside the airport, someone who owed me a favor. But that person is gone now, and I'm running out of allies. The documents in the envelope, Marcus said. What exactly do they prove? Everything. Financial records showing how the Morrison Group has been systematically undermining my contracts, bribing officials, even sabotaging aircraft to make my company look unreliable. If those documents reach the right people, it's enough to bring down their entire operation. Marcus rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache building behind his eyes. And if they don't reach the right people, then my daughters become leverage. They'll use them to force me to sign over control of my company. And once they have what they want, none of us will be safe. The implications were staggering. Marcus was harboring 2 children who were essentially the key to a corporate war, worth millions of dollars. No wonder people were willing to go to extraordinary lengths to find them. Mrs. Delacroix, I need you to understand something. I'm not equipped for this. I'm a janitor. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment, and I can barely manage my own custody situation. I want to help your daughters, but I don't know how to protect them from the kind of people you're describing. You've already done more than you know. You found them when they were alone and frightened. You fed them. You kept them safe. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. But what happens next? How long can this go on? Catherine was quiet for a moment, and Marcus could hear voices in the background, urgent and muffled. When she spoke again, her voice was rushed. I need 48 hours. There's someone I've been trying to reach, someone who can help us expose what's really happening. If I can get the evidence to the right federal prosecutor, this whole thing. And if you can't, then I'll turn myself in and hope that the system protects my daughters better than it's protected me. Marcus heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Sophia and Isabella standing in the kitchen doorway, their faces solemn and worried. "Is that Mommy?" Isabella asked quietly. Marcus nodded and held out the phone. "Do you want to talk to her?" Both girls rushed forward, and Marcus put the phone on speaker. The reunion, even over a crackling cell phone connection, was heartbreaking in its intensity. Catherine's voice broke as she told her daughters how much she loved them and how proud she was of how brave they were being. The girls peppered her with questions about when she was coming to get them and whether she was safe. "I need you both to listen to me very carefully," Catherine said. "Mr. Marcus is going to take care of you for a little while longer. I need you to be good for him and do whatever he tells you to do. Can you promise me that?" "We promise, Mommy," they said in unison. "And girls, remember what we talked about before you got on the airplane? About staying together and looking out for each other?" "We remember," Sophia said. "We won't let anyone separate us." "That's my brave girls. I love you both more than all the stars in the sky." After the girls had said their goodbyes and retreated to the living room, Catherine's voice became businesslike again. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to arrange for some money to be deposited into your account to cover expenses for the girls. I'm also going to have someone deliver some supplies to your apartment tonight." "What kind of supplies?" "Things you'll need if this situation goes on longer than expected. Clothes for the girls, some food, and some items for your own protection." "Protection?" "Mr. Chen, you need to understand that by helping my daughters, you've made yourself a target. The Morrison Group doesn't leave loose ends, and they'll view you as a threat as long as you know what you know." Marcus felt his stomach drop. He had been so focused on protecting Sophia and Isabella that he hadn't fully considered how his involvement might affect his own safety, or more importantly, Tommy's safety. "Are you saying my son could be in danger? I don't know. But I think it would be wise to make sure he's somewhere safe until this is resolved." Marcus's mind raced. Tommy was with Janet, which was probably the safest place for him right now. But how could Marcus explain to his ex-wife that their son might be in danger because of something Marcus had gotten involved with? Janet already questioned his judgment when it came to parenting. This would only confirm her worst fears about his ability to provide a stable environment for Tommy. "There's something else you need to know," Catherine continued. "The Morrison Group has been monitoring communications, including phone calls. This call is probably being traced as we speak. After we hang up, you need to turn off your phone and not use it again. Then how will you contact me? The person who delivers the supplies tonight will bring you a secure phone. Use only that phone from now on. Mrs. Delacroix, I have to ask you something. How do I know you're telling me the truth? How do I know you're not the one who's done something wrong and you're using your daughters to avoid the consequences?" It was a fair question, and Marcus was proud of himself for asking it despite the emotional manipulation of hearing a mother separated from her children. He needed to be sure he was on the right side of whatever was happening. Catherine sighed. "Because if I were guilty of the things they're accusing me of, I would have disappeared years ago with enough money to live comfortably anywhere in the world. Instead, I've spent the last 5 years fighting to keep my company independent and honest while they've systematically tried to destroy everything I've built." She paused, and when she continued, her voice was heavy with exhaustion. "Mr. Chen, my daughters are the most important thing in my world. I would never put them in danger to save my business. But I also won't let criminals take over an industry that employs thousands of people and affects the safety of millions of travelers." The line went quiet except for some background noise that sounded like wind and traffic. "I have to go now." Take care of my girls, and remember, trust no one except the person who brings you the supplies tonight. They'll give you a code word. Thunderbird. Anyone else who approaches you, no matter what credentials they show, should be considered dangerous." The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in his quiet kitchen. In the living room, he could hear the twins talking quietly to each other, their voices mixing with the sound of the television. His normal life, his predictable routine. His modest but stable existence had vanished completely in the span of 24 hours. He turned off his phone as instructed and removed the battery, feeling like he was severing his last connection to the normal world. Then he sat down with Sophia and Isabella to figure out how they were going to survive the next 48 hours. "Girls, your mommy explained to me what's happening. There are some bad people who want to hurt her business, and they think they can use you to make her give up. That means we need to be very careful for the next couple of days. Are we going?" "To stay here?" Sophia asked. "For now, yes. But we might need to leave quickly if I think we're not safe anymore." Isabella moved closer to him on the couch. "Mr. Marcus, are you scared?" Marcus considered lying to reassure her, but something about these girls made him want to be honest. They had already been through so much deception and uncertainty. "Yes, I am scared. But I'm not going to let anything happen to you. We're scared too," Sophia admitted. "But we feel safer with you than we did at the airport." As the afternoon turned to evening, Marcus tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for the girls while his mind churned through everything Catherine had told him. He made them grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch, helped them with some basic math, problems from workbooks they had in their backpack, and even let them rearrange his living room furniture to make it more cozy. But he was constantly alert for any sounds in the hallway outside his apartment, any cars that stayed parked too long in the parking lot, any indication that their location had been discovered. The weight of responsibility was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Even when Tommy stayed with him, Marcus knew that if something went wrong, he could call Janet or take Tommy to a hospital or rely on any number of systems designed to protect children. Now he was operating completely outside those systems, with no backup and no safety net. Around 6 o'clock, there was a soft knock at his door. Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he looked through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, middle-aged with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore jeans and a simple jacket and carried a large duffel bag. She looked more like someone's aunt than a dangerous operative, but Marcus had learned not to trust appearances. "Yes?" He called through the door. "Thunderbird," the woman said quietly. Marcus opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain lock. "Engaged. Who are you?" "My name is Linda Martinez. I work for Catherine. May I come in?" Marcus studied her for a moment, then unlatched the chain and opened the door. Linda stepped inside quickly, scanning the apartment with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. "Are the girls here?" she asked. "Sophia, Isabella. Come here for a minute." The twins emerged from the kitchen where they had been coloring at the table. Linda's entire demeanor changed when she saw them, her professional composure melting into obvious relief and affection. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, kneeling down to their level. "Your mother has been so worried about you. Are you going to take us to her?" Isabella asked hopefully. "Not yet, sweetheart. But I'm going to help Mr. Marcus take care of you until she can come get you herself." Linda stood and turned to Marcus. "We need to talk." They moved to the far end of the living room while the girls returned to their coloring. Linda unzipped the duffel bag and began removing items: children's clothes, non-perishable food, a first aid kit, and several pieces of electronic equipment that Marcus didn't recognize. "Catherine asked me to explain the situation more fully," Linda said in a low voice. "The Morrison Group isn't just trying to take over her company. They're part of a larger operation that's been infiltrating the aviation industry for years. They use legitimate business practices as a cover for smuggling operations, moving everything from drugs to weapons to people. Marcus felt his blood run cold, and Catherine discovered this. She's been investigating suspicious activity for months. Aircraft that were supposed to be empty showing up overweight, cargo manifests that didn't match actual shipments, flight routes that made no economic sense. When she started asking questions, they tried to buy her out. When she refused, they escalated to threats. And now they're desperate. Catherine's evidence could expose their entire network, which involves billions of dollars in operations across multiple countries. They can't let her live, and they can't let her daughters grow up to ask questions about what happened to their mother. The implications were staggering. Marcus had thought he was dealing with a corporate dispute, but this was something much larger and more dangerous. Why didn't she go to the FBI from the beginning? She tried. But the Morrison Group has people inside federal agencies, including some who are specifically assigned to aviation security. The first FBI agent she contacted ended up dead in a car accident 3 days later. Marcus sat down heavily on his couch, suddenly feeling overwhelmed by the scope of what he had stumbled into. Linda, I'm not equipped for this. I don't know anything about corporate espionage or criminal conspiracies. I'm just trying to help 2 kids who were scared and alone. And that's exactly why Catherine trusts you, Linda replied. You're not part of the system that's been corrupted. You don't have any agenda except protecting those girls. She pulled a cell phone from the duffel bag and handed it to him. This is encrypted and untraceable. Catherine will contact you on this phone only. Your regular phone should stay off. What about my son? What about my job? My whole life is falling apart because of this. Linda's expression softened. I know this is asking too much of you, but Catherine is working with someone who can help end this situation quickly. If everything goes according to plan, this will be over within 48 hours. And if it doesn't go according to plan, then we'll have to consider other options. The vagueness of her answer was not reassuring. Marcus looked over at Sophia and Isabella, who were now sprawled on the floor with their coloring books, completely absorbed in their artwork. They looked so normal, so innocent. It was hard to believe that they were at the center of an international criminal conspiracy. There's something else, Linda continued. We've been monitoring communications, and we know that someone leaked information about your involvement to the Morrison Group. They know you have the girls. Marcus felt his stomach drop. How is that possible? The police detective who called you today, Sarah Williams, doesn't exist. The call was made by someone working for the Morrison Group to confirm that you had contact with the girls. By not coming in for the interview, you basically confirmed their suspicions. So they know where I live? Probably not yet, but they're working on it. You may need to move the girls to a different location. Marcus rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache building. Where am I supposed to take them? I don't have any other options. Linda reached into the duffel bag again and pulled out a set of keys. There's a cabin about an hour north of here, up in the mountains. It's isolated and secure. If you need to leave quickly, that's where you should go. She handed him a piece of paper with an address and detailed directions. The cabin is stocked with supplies and has no electronic footprint. No internet, no landline, no credit card transactions. If you go there, you'll be completely off the grid. Marcus studied the address, trying to imagine himself driving 2 8-year-old girls to a remote mountain cabin while being pursued by international criminals. The whole situation felt surreal, like something from a movie rather than his actual life. Linda, can I ask you something? Who are you exactly? How do you know Catherine? Linda smiled for the first time since entering the apartment. I used to work for the State Department in a division that investigated international fraud and corruption. Catherine hired me 2 years ago when she first started noticing irregularities in her business. I've been helping her gather evidence ever since. And you believe her story completely? I've seen the evidence, Mr. Chen. Financial records, recorded conversations, even photographs. The Morrison Group is everything Catherine says they are, and worse. They were interrupted by Isabella tugging on Marcus's sleeve. Mr. Marcus, I'm hungry. Can we have dinner? Marcus realized that he had been so focused on the crisis that he had forgotten about the basic needs of the children in his care. Of course, sweetheart. Let's see what we can make. As he prepared a simple dinner of pasta and jarred sauce, Marcus tried to process everything Linda had told him. The situation was far more dangerous than he had initially understood, but he was also more committed than ever to protecting Sophia and Isabella. They had trusted him when they had no one else to turn to, and he wasn't going to abandon them now. After dinner, Linda spent some time talking with the girls, asking them about their interests and their school while simultaneously observing them with the trained eye of someone who understood the psychological impact of trauma on children. Marcus was struck by how normal they seemed, despite everything they had been through. They're remarkably resilient, Linda told him as they cleaned up the kitchen. But they're also at an age where they don't fully understand the implications of what's happening. That's both a blessing and a concern. What do you mean? They trust easily, which is how you were able to help them. But it also means they might trust the wrong person if they're approached by someone who knows how to manipulate children. The thought sent a chill through Marcus. He realized that keeping the girls safe wasn't just about hiding from the Morrison Group. It was about protecting them from anyone who might try to use their innocence against them. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself settling into an unexpected domestic routine. He helped the girls brush their teeth using toothbrushes that Linda had brought, found them something to wear as pajamas from the children's clothes in the duffel bag, and even read them a story from one of the books Linda had included in the supplies. Mr. Marcus, Sophia said as he was tucking them into the makeshift bed he had created on his couch. Are you going to be our daddy now? The question caught him completely off guard. What do you mean, sweetheart? Well, Mommy is gone and you're taking care of us. That's what daddies do, right? Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. I'm taking care of you until your mommy can come back. But you're right that taking care of people you love is what daddies do. Do you love us? Isabella asked. The question was so direct and innocent that Marcus found himself answering without thinking. Yes, I do love you both. I've only known you for one day, but I love you. Both girls smiled and settled deeper under their blankets. We love you, too, they said almost in unison. After the girls were asleep, Marcus and Linda sat at his kitchen table discussing contingency plans. She had brought him cash to cover expenses, detailed instructions for reaching the mountain cabin, and contact information for a lawyer who specialized in federal whistleblower cases. If something happens to Catherine, Linda said quietly, this lawyer will help you navigate the legal system to ensure the girls are protected. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. When will I hear from Catherine again? Tomorrow night at the latest. She's meeting with a federal prosecutor who's been investigating the Morrison Group independently. If she can convince him to act on her evidence, this whole situation could be resolved very quickly. And if she can't? Linda was quiet for a moment. Then we'll have to consider the possibility that Catherine won't be able to reclaim her daughters anytime soon. In that case, the girls will need someone who can provide long-term stability. The implication was clear, and it terrified Marcus. He had stumbled into this situation trying to help two lost children, but he was rapidly approaching a point where he might become their permanent guardian. The responsibility was overwhelming, especially given his own complicated custody situation with Tommy. After Linda left, promising to check in the next day, Marcus lay awake on the floor beside the couch where the girls were sleeping. The apartment was quiet except for their soft breathing and the distant hum of traffic outside. For the first time since this all began, he allowed himself to think about what his life might look like if Sophia and Isabella became a permanent part of it. He thought about his small apartment and how inadequate it would be for 3 children. He thought about his job and whether he could provide financially for a larger family. He thought about Janet and how she would react to him suddenly becoming the guardian of 2 additional children. But mostly, he thought about the trust that Sophia and Isabella had placed in him, and the love that had somehow blossomed between them in just 24 hours. Whatever happened next, whatever dangers they might face, he knew that his life had been fundamentally changed by 2 little girls who had called him daddy and meant it. Outside, the city continued its nightly rhythm, unaware that in a modest apartment on the 2nd floor of an unremarkable building, a man was discovering what it truly meant to be a father. Marcus woke before dawn to the sound of car doors slamming in the parking lot below. He had been sleeping fitfully on the floor beside the couch, his body alert to every sound despite his exhaustion. The digital clock on his microwave showed 4:47 a.m., and through the thin curtains of his apartment window, he could see the first gray hints of morning creeping across the sky. He lay still for a moment, listening carefully. The sounds could have been early shift workers heading to their jobs, but something about the deliberate way the car doors had closed made his skin prickle with unease. He eased himself up from the floor, careful not to wake Sophia and Isabella, who were still curled together under their blankets on the couch. Moving quietly to the window, Marcus peered through a gap in the curtains. In the parking lot below, he could see 2 dark sedans parked near the entrance to his building. The vehicles looked expensive and out of place in the modest complex where most residents drove older economy cars. Even more concerning, he could see figures sitting in both cars, their faces obscured by the early morning shadows. Marcus felt his heart rate spike as he realized that Linda's warning had come true. Somehow, the Morrison group had tracked him down. He had perhaps minutes before they made their move, and he needed to get the girls out of the apartment immediately. He moved quickly but quietly to the couch and gently shook Sophia's shoulder. "Girls, wake up. We need to leave right now." Both twins stirred, their faces confused and sleepy. "What's wrong?" Isabella whispered. "Remember how we talked about the bad people who are looking for you? I think they found us. We need to get dressed and go to the safe place." The urgency in his voice seemed to cut through their grogginess. Without asking further questions, both girls rolled out of their makeshift bed and began gathering their belongings. Marcus was struck again by their resilience and their ability to adapt quickly to dangerous situations. He grabbed the duffel bag that Linda had left and quickly stuffed it with the supplies they would need. The encrypted phone, the cash, the directions to the mountain cabin, and the children's clothes all went into the bag along with some food from his kitchen and the manila envelope containing Catherine's evidence. "Mr. Marcus," Sophia whispered, "what about our coloring books?" Despite the urgency of the situation, Marcus took a moment to grab the coloring books and crayons from the kitchen table. If they were going to be hiding in a remote cabin, the girls would need something to keep them occupied. As he added the art supplies to the bag, he heard footsteps in the hallway outside his apartment. The footsteps were deliberate and measured, clearly belonging to someone who was trying to be quiet, but wasn't entirely succeeding. Marcus counted at least 2 sets of feet, possibly 3. He guided the girls toward the back of the apartment, his mind racing through their limited options. His apartment was on the 2nd floor, which meant jumping from the windows wasn't feasible with 2 small children. The front door was obviously not an option with people in the hallway, but there was a fire escape outside his bedroom window that led down to the alley behind the building. Marcus had never actually tested the fire escape, and he wasn't even sure it was structurally sound, but it seemed like their only chance. He led the girls into his bedroom and quietly opened the window, grateful that he had oiled the hinges a few months earlier when they had been squeaking. The metal fire escape groaned slightly under his weight as he stepped onto it, but it held. He helped Sophia and then Isabella climb through the window, putting his finger to his lips to remind them to stay quiet. The three of them crept down the metal stairs, each step seeming impossibly loud in the pre-dawn stillness. As they reached the bottom of the fire escape, Marcus heard a sharp knock on his apartment door. A voice called out, "Mr. Chen, this is Detective Williams. We need to speak with you about the missing children." Marcus felt a surge of anger at the deception. Linda had warned him that Detective Williams didn't exist, and now these people were using a fake police identity to try to gain access to his apartment. He wondered how long it would take them to realize that he wasn't going to answer the door, and how long after that before they decided to break in. His Honda Civic was parked at the far end of the alley, behind a dumpster where it wasn't visible from the main parking lot. Marcus had chosen that spot specifically because it was cheaper than the covered parking, but now he was grateful for the privacy it provided. They hurried toward the car, Marcus constantly scanning their surroundings for any sign that they had been spotted. As they reached the Honda, Marcus heard the sound of splintering wood from above. Someone had just kicked in his apartment door. They were out of time. He quickly unlocked the car and helped the girls into the back seat, tossing the duffel bag in after them. "Stay down and stay quiet," he whispered as he started the engine. The Honda turned over on the first try, which felt like a small miracle given how unreliable it had been lately. Marcus drove slowly out of the alley, not wanting to attract attention with squealing tires or a racing engine. As they emerged onto the street behind his building, he could see more figures moving around the front of the complex. It looked like at least 6 people were involved in the operation to find them, which reinforced his growing understanding of how serious the situation had become. "Where are we going?" Isabella asked from the back seat. "To the mountains. Remember Linda told us about a safe place where we could hide if we needed to? Are we going to live there now?" Sophia asked. Marcus glanced at them in the rearview mirror. Both girls looked more curious than frightened, as if this early morning escape was just another adventure rather than a life-threatening situation. "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll figure it out when we get there." The drive through Denver's empty pre-dawn streets gave Marcus time to think about what had just happened. The fact that the Morrison group had found his apartment so quickly suggested that they had significant resources and possibly inside information about his identity. He wondered if his supervisor at the airport had been compromised, or if they had somehow traced his vehicle registration or financial records. More troubling was the realization that he was now truly on the run. He couldn't go back to his apartment, he couldn't return to his job, and he couldn't contact anyone from his normal life without potentially putting them in danger. Most painfully, he couldn't see Tommy or even let Janet know that he was safe. As they left the city limits and began climbing into the foothills, Marcus tried to push down the panic that was building in his chest. He had made a choice to protect Sophia and Isabella, and that choice had consequences that extended far beyond what he had initially imagined. There was no going back now. The directions Linda had given him led them along increasingly narrow and winding roads as they climbed higher into the mountains. The Honda's engine strained against the elevation and the steep grades, but it continued to perform reliably. Marcus found himself talking to the car under his breath, encouraging it to keep going just a little farther. "Mr. Marcus, look at all the trees," Isabella said, pressing her face against the window. "There are so many of them." "And look how tall the mountains are," Sophia added. "They look like they go all the way to the sky." Despite everything that had happened, Marcus smiled at their wonder. These girls had clearly spent most of their lives in cities and airports, and the natural beauty of the Colorado mountains was something entirely new to them. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine that this was just a normal family trip rather than a desperate flight from danger. The cabin was located at the end of a dirt road that branched off from the main mountain highway. Marcus almost missed the turn, marked only by a small wooden sign that read "Private Property" in faded letters. The dirt road was rutted and rocky, and the Honda bounced and scraped as it navigated the uneven surface. After about a mile of slow driving, the trees opened up to reveal a small log cabin nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. The cabin looked well maintained despite its remote location, with a covered porch and windows that sparkled clean in the morning sunlight. Smoke was rising from the chimney, which surprised Marcus until he remembered that Linda had said the cabin was stocked and ready for use. As they pulled up beside the cabin, the front door opened and a man stepped out onto the porch. He was tall and lean, probably in his 50s, with graying hair and the weathered skin of someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, and there was something about his posture that suggested military or law enforcement background. Marcus felt a moment of panic, wondering if they had driven straight into a trap. But the man raised his hand in a gesture that seemed more welcoming than threatening, and something about his demeanor reminded Marcus of Linda's calm professionalism. "Mr. Chen?" The man called out as Marcus stepped out of the car. "I'm David Walsh. Linda sent me to help you get settled." Marcus helped the girls out of the back seat, still feeling cautious despite the man's friendly tone. "How do I know you're really here to help us?" David smiled and said, "Thunderbird." The code word helped Marcus relax slightly, but he remained alert as David approached them. "I've been maintaining this place for Catherine for about 2 years," David explained. "She wanted to make sure she had a secure location where she could bring the girls if things ever went bad." "Things have definitely gone bad," Marcus said, looking around at the remote location. "We had to leave my apartment this morning because people were trying to break in." David's expression grew serious. "I heard. Linda contacted me last night and told me to expect you. The good news is that this place is completely off the grid. No phone lines, no internet, no electronic footprint of any kind. The bad news is that you're essentially cut off from the outside world, except for the encrypted phone Linda gave you." "Is that safe?" Marcus asked, thinking about Catherine's promise to contact him within 48 hours. "It's the safest option you have right now. The Morrison Group has access to all kinds of electronic surveillance, but they can't track what they can't detect." David led them inside the cabin, which was more spacious and comfortable than Marcus had expected. The main room contained a stone fireplace with a fire already crackling, a kitchen area with a gas stove and refrigerator, and a dining table surrounded by mismatched chairs. There were 2 bedrooms, one with bunk beds that looked like they had been specifically installed for children. Catherine had this place set up as a safe house about 2 years ago, when she first started investigating the irregularities in her business. David explained as he showed them around. She wanted to make sure she had somewhere to bring the girls. "If things ever got dangerous, how long can we stay here?" Marcus asked. "As long as you need to. The cabin is stocked with food and supplies for at least 2 weeks, and there's a generator for electricity and a well for water. If you need to stay longer than that, I can arrange for additional supplies to be brought in." Sophia and Isabella were exploring the cabin with obvious delight, opening cabinets and drawers and exclaiming over everything they found. In the children's bedroom, they discovered not only bunk beds, but also a chest full of toys, books, and games. "Mommy really did think of everything," Isabella said, holding up a stuffed bear that looked remarkably similar to the one she had been carrying in her backpack. "Your mother loves you very much," David said gently. "Everything she's doing is to make sure you're safe and that you can be together again soon." As the day progressed, Marcus found himself settling into the rhythm of life at the cabin. David showed him how to operate the generator and maintain the fire, while the girls explored the surrounding woods under careful supervision. The isolation that had initially felt threatening began to feel protective, like they were wrapped in a cocoon of safety far from the dangers of the outside world. David left in the early afternoon, promising to return in a few days to check on them and bring any news about Catherine's situation. Before he departed, he gave Marcus detailed instructions about security protocols and emergency procedures. If anyone approaches the cabin who doesn't give you the code word, you need to assume they're hostile, David warned. There's a radio in the bedroom closet that will reach me in an emergency, but use it only if you have no other choice. After David's departure, Marcus and the girls fell into an unexpectedly domestic routine. They prepared lunch together using supplies from the well-stocked kitchen, with the girls helping to set the table and Marcus teaching them how to safely operate the gas stove. In the afternoon, they took a short hike on the trails around the cabin, with Marcus pointing out different types of trees and birds while the girls collected interesting rocks and leaves. As evening approached, they gathered around the fireplace for dinner and games. Marcus had found a deck of cards in one of the kitchen drawers, and he taught the girls how to play simple games like Go Fish and Old Maid. Their laughter echoed through the cabin, creating a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the stone hearth. "Mr. Marcus," Sophia said as they were getting ready for bed, "I like it here. It's quiet and cozy, and nobody's trying to scare us." "I like it too," Isabella agreed. "It feels like we're camping, but with a real bathroom and a real kitchen." Marcus tucked them into their bunk beds, marveling at how quickly they had adapted to yet another new environment. Their resilience continued to amaze him, but he also worried about the long-term psychological impact of all the upheaval they had experienced. "Girls, can I ask you something? Are you scared about what's happening with your mommy?" Both girls were quiet for a moment, then Sophia spoke up. "We were really scared at the airport because we didn't know what was going to happen to us. But we're not scared anymore because you're taking care of us. And because Mommy is really smart and really strong," Isabella added. "She always figures out how to fix things." Marcus felt his heart clench with emotion. These children had been through experiences that would traumatize many adults, yet they maintained an unshakable faith in their mother and a trust in him that was both humbling and terrifying. After the girls were asleep, Marcus sat by the fire, with the encrypted phone in his hand, waiting for Catherine to call. The silence of the mountain night was profound, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustle of wind through the pine trees. He found himself thinking about his own son, wondering what Tommy was doing and whether Janet was worried about his absence. He also thought about his job at the airport, which he had undoubtedly lost by now. His supervisor would have marked him as a no-show, and there would be questions about why he had disappeared at the same time as the children everyone was looking for. His modest but stable life was disintegrating, and he didn't know how or when he would be able to rebuild it. But as he looked at the bedroom door where Sophia and Isabella were sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, he knew he had made the right choice. Whatever the cost to his own life, he couldn't have abandoned two frightened children who had no one else to trust. The encrypted phone rang just after 10 o'clock, its soft buzzing sound seeming impossibly loud in the quiet. "Cabin." Marcus answered immediately, his voice low so as not to wake the girls. "Marcus, it's Catherine. Are you and the girls safe?" "We're at the cabin. David helped us get settled. How are you?" "I'm alive, which is more than I expected 24 hours ago." Catherine's voice sounded exhausted but determined. "I met with the federal prosecutor today. It took some convincing, but I think he's finally taking the situation seriously. What happens now?" "He's assembling a task force to investigate the Morrison Group's operations. If everything goes according to plan, they'll start making arrests within the next 48 hours. Marcus felt a surge of hope. "And then this will all be over?" "In theory, yes. But Marcus, I need you to understand that even after the arrests, it may take some time for the legal system to sort everything out. There could be trials, testimony, ongoing investigations. It might be months before our lives return to normal." The implications of what she was saying began to sink in. "Are you asking me to take care of the girls for months?" "I'm asking you to consider the possibility that they might need stability for longer than we originally hoped." I know it's not fair to you, and I know it's not what you signed up for when you found them at the airport." Marcus looked toward the bedroom where the girls were sleeping. "Catherine, can I ask you something personal? If this all gets resolved and the bad guys are arrested, what kind of life are you planning to give Sophia and Isabella? Will you keep traveling constantly for business? Will they keep moving between different caregivers?" There was a long pause before Catherine answered. "That's a fair question, and it's one I've been thinking about a lot lately. This whole experience has made me realize that I've been prioritizing my business over my daughter's need for stability. When this is over, I want to step back from the day-to-day operations of the company and focus on being the mother they deserve. But until then, they need someone who can give them the kind of stability and attention that I haven't been able to provide. Someone who puts their needs first, who makes them feel safe and loved." Marcus understood what she was really saying. "You're asking me to be their father. I'm asking you to consider it. I've seen how much they trust you, how much they've bonded with you in just a few days. They call you their daddy, Marcus. That's not something children do lightly." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was suggesting. "Catherine, I have my own son. I have my own custody situation to deal with. I can't just suddenly become the guardian of 2 additional children without that affecting everything else in my life. I know. And I'm prepared to help with that in any way I can. Financial support, legal assistance, whatever you need to make it work." "It's not about money," Marcus said, though he appreciated the offer. "It's about whether I can actually be the kind of father that Sophia and Isabella deserve. I'm barely managing my relationship with Tommy as it is. Marcus, in the past 3 days, you've shown more genuine care and protection for my daughters than some people show their own children in a lifetime. You risked your job, your home, your safety, everything you had to keep them safe. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of father you would be." They talked for another hour, working through the practical and emotional implications of what Catherine was proposing. By the time they ended the call, Marcus felt like his entire understanding of his own future had shifted. He was no longer just a man helping 2 lost children. He was potentially becoming their permanent guardian, their father in every way that mattered. He sat by the dying fire for a long time after the call ended, staring into the glowing embers and trying to imagine what his life would look like with 3 children instead of 1. The financial challenges would be significant, but not insurmountable with Catherine's support. The emotional challenges would be even greater, but also potentially more rewarding than anything he had ever experienced. Most importantly, he thought about what kind of example he would be setting for Tommy. His son would see that when people needed help, when children were in danger, you didn't walk away just because it was inconvenient or difficult. You stepped up, you made sacrifices, you put love and protection above your own comfort. As he finally prepared for bed, Marcus realized that he had already made his decision. Somewhere between finding 2 frightened girls in an airport and tucking them into bunk beds in a mountain cabin, he had become their father. The legal paperwork and official arrangements would follow, but the emotional bond was already established. He checked on Sophia and Isabella one more time before settling onto the couch for the night. They were sleeping peacefully, their faces relaxed and untroubled despite everything they had been through. In their trust and resilience, Marcus saw a reflection of the man he wanted to become, the father he was capable of being. Outside, the mountain night wrapped around the cabin like a protective embrace, keeping the world and its dangers at bay. For the first time since this all began, Marcus felt truly hopeful about the future. 3 days later, Marcus stood on the cabin's porch watching Sophia and Isabella chase a squirrel through the pine trees, their laughter echoing across the mountain clearing. The morning sun filtered through the branches, creating patterns of light and shadow that danced across their faces as they played. It was hard to believe that just a week ago, he had been living his quiet, predictable life as a janitor at Denver International Airport. The encrypted phone had remained silent since Catherine's last call, which both reassured and worried him. She had promised updates as the federal investigation progressed, but the lack of communication left him wondering whether things were going according to plan or if something had gone terribly wrong. "Mr. Marcus, come help us catch the squirrel," Isabella called out, her purple sweater bright against the green of the forest. "I don't think that squirrel wants to be caught," Marcus replied, walking down from the porch. "But maybe we can convince him to be our friend." He sat down on a fallen log and pulled a handful of nuts from his pocket, left over from their breakfast. Slowly and quietly, he placed them on the ground a few feet away. The squirrel, a bold gray creature with intelligent dark eyes, watched them from his perch on a low branch. "You have to be very still," Marcus whispered to the girls. "Wild animals are naturally afraid of people, but if you show them you're not dangerous, sometimes they'll trust you." Sophia and Isabella settled beside him on the log, their small bodies vibrating with the effort of staying motionless. After several minutes, the squirrel cautiously descended the tree trunk and approached the nuts. He grabbed one in his tiny paws, studied the three humans watching him, then scampered back up the tree to enjoy his prize. "He took it," Sophia whispered excitedly. "He actually took the nut." "That's how trust works," Marcus said, surprised by the profundity of his own words. "It starts small, with little acts of kindness, and it grows over time." The moment was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching on the dirt road. Marcus felt his body tense as he listened to the engine growing closer. David wasn't scheduled to return for another 2 days, and Catherine had emphasized that no one else should know about the cabin's location. "Girls, go inside right now," Marcus said, his voice calm but firm. "Remember what we practiced. Go to the bedroom and stay there until I come get you." Both twins recognized the change in his tone and hurried into the cabin without argument. Marcus watched through the window as a familiar pickup truck emerged from the trees. Relief flooded through him as he recognized David behind the wheel, but his relief turned to concern when he saw the grim expression on the older man's face. David climbed out of the truck and walked toward the cabin with the purposeful stride of someone carrying bad news. "Marcus, we need to talk," he said without preamble. "What's happened? Is Catherine okay?" "Catherine's alive, but the situation has changed dramatically. The federal task force moved faster than anyone expected. They started making arrests yesterday morning." Marcus felt a surge of hope. "That's good news, isn't it?" David's expression remained troubled. "It's complicated. They arrested several key figures in the Morrison Group, including some people who had infiltrated federal agencies. But during the raids, they discovered that the conspiracy was even larger than Catherine had realized." "What do you mean?" "The Morrison Group wasn't just involved in smuggling and aviation fraud. They were part of an international network that included human trafficking, arms dealing, and money laundering. When the arrest started, other members of the network went into panic mode." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "And that affects us how?" "They've put a bounty on Catherine and the girls. Not just the Morrison Group, but their international partners. They believe that Catherine's evidence could expose operations across multiple continents. The implications were staggering." Marcus had thought they were dealing with a domestic business dispute, but now it seemed they were caught in something with global ramifications. "How much of a bounty?" $10 million. "For Catherine alive, $5 million for the girls, dead or alive." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Dead or alive? They're willing to kill 2 8-year-old children? They view the girls as future threats. Children who might grow up asking questions about what happened to their mother. Children who might someday have access to evidence that could reopen investigations. Marcus sat down heavily on the porch steps, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what David was telling him. So even with the arrests, we're not safe. The arrests have actually made things more dangerous in the short term. The remaining members of the network are desperate to eliminate any evidence of their operations before more law enforcement agencies get involved. Where is Catherine now? In federal protective custody. She's working with investigators to help them understand the full scope of the network, but she's essentially a prisoner until they can guarantee her safety. Marcus looked toward the cabin where Sophia and Isabella were waiting, probably listening at the door despite his instructions to stay in the bedroom. What does this mean for the girls? It means they can't go back to their normal lives, at least not anytime soon. Even if the immediate threats are eliminated, there will always be the possibility that someone connected to the network will come looking for them. So what are you suggesting? David pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Catherine asked me to give you this. She's had her lawyers draw up temporary guardianship papers. If you sign them, you become the girl's legal guardian until she can safely reclaim them. Marcus stared at the envelope, knowing that whatever was inside would fundamentally change his life. And if I don't sign them? Then they go into federal witness protection, probably under assumed identities, possibly separated from each other for security reasons. The thought of Sophia and Isabella being separated, of them losing not only their mother, but also each other, was unbearable to Marcus. He had seen how completely they relied on their twin bond, how they drew strength from their shared experiences and mutual support. If I sign the papers, what happens to my son? What happens to my relationship with Tommy? Catherine has arranged for financial support that would allow you to petition for full custody of Tommy as well. She believes that having a stable, loving home with siblings might actually be beneficial for all three children. Marcus opened the envelope and scanned the legal documents inside. They were more comprehensive than he had expected, essentially making him the girl's father in every legal sense. Catherine was signing over all parental rights and responsibilities, along with a trust fund that would provide for their education, health care, and living expenses. She's really giving them up, he said quietly. She's giving them the best chance at a normal, safe life. Catherine loves those girls more than anything, but she also understands that her presence in their lives makes them targets. And you? Think I can keep them safe? David studied Marcus for a long moment. I think you already have. You've made decisions over the past week that most people wouldn't have the courage to make. You've put their welfare above your own safety, your own comfort, your own future. That's exactly what a good father does. The cabin door opened and Sophia appeared, followed closely by Isabella. They must have been listening to the conversation, because their faces showed a mixture of fear and determination that seemed far too mature for their age. Are we going to have to go away? Sophia asked directly. Are they going to separate us? Marcus looked at David, who nodded slightly, giving him permission to explain the situation honestly. There are some people who want to hurt you because of what your mommy knows about their bad business. The police have arrested some of them, but not all of them. So we can't go home? Isabella asked. Your mommy is working with the police to make sure all the bad people get arrested. But until that happens, she wants you to stay with people who can keep you safe. People like you? Sophia asked. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. If you want to stay with me, then yes. But you need to understand that it might be for a long time. Maybe a very long time. Both girls looked at each other, having one of their silent twin conversations. Finally, Isabella spoke up. We want to stay with you. You make us feel safe, and you don't lie to us about scary things. And you read good bedtime stories, Sophia added, trying to lighten the mood despite the gravity of the situation. Marcus found himself smiling despite everything. Okay then. But we're going to have to make some changes. We can't stay here forever, and we can't go back to my old apartment. We'll need to find a new place to live, and I'll need to find a new job. Can we help pick out the new house? Isabella asked hopefully. Of course you can help. We'll pick it out together, as a family. The word hung in the air between them, carrying weight and promise and commitment. Marcus realized that he had just made the most important decision of his life, and he felt surprisingly calm about it. David helped him complete the legal paperwork, serving as a witness and notary for the documents that would make Marcus the legal guardian of Sophia and Isabella Delacroix. As they finished the last signature, David handed Marcus another envelope. This contains new identification documents for all three of you. Social security cards, birth certificates, passports. As far as the government is concerned, you're now Marcus Thompson, and the girls are Sophia and Isabella Thompson, your adopted daughters. Marcus stared at the documents. Thompson? It's close enough to your real name that you'll respond to it naturally, but different enough that it won't trigger any database searches. The identities are completely legitimate, created through federal witness protection protocols. So Marcus Chen is dead? Marcus Chen is taking an indefinite leave of absence from his life. If and when the threat against the girls is permanently resolved, you can choose to reclaim your original identity or continue with the new one. That evening, after David had departed with promises to check on them regularly, Marcus sat with Sophia and Isabella around the cabin's fireplace. They were working on a puzzle they had found in the toy chest, a complicated landscape scene that required patience and teamwork to complete. "Mr. Marcus," Isabella said, carefully fitting a piece into place, "can we call you Daddy now? Since you're really going to be our daddy?" Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. "Is that what you want to call me? We've been calling you that in our heads for days," Sophia admitted. "It feels right." "Then yes, you can call me Daddy." Both girls beamed at him, and Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the fire crackling nearby. He thought about Tommy and wondered how his son would react to suddenly having two sisters. He thought about Janet and the custody battle that had seemed so important just a week ago, but now felt like a minor concern compared to the life and death stakes he was dealing with. "Daddy," Isabella said, testing out the word, "when we get our new house, can we have a dog? And a garden where we can grow vegetables?" Sophia added. Marcus laughed, amazed by their ability to focus on normal childhood desires despite everything they had been through. "We'll see about the dog. And yes, we can definitely have a garden." As they continued working on the puzzle, Marcus found himself thinking about the future in ways he never had before. He was no longer planning for just himself and his relationship with Tommy. He was planning for a family of 4, possibly 5, if he could gain full custody of his son. The challenges would be enormous, but so would the rewards. "Daddy," Sophia said quietly, "do you think Mommy is sad that she can't take care of us anymore?" It was the question Marcus had been dreading, but also the one he knew was most important to answer honestly. "I think your mommy is very sad about having to be away from you. But I also think she's happy knowing that you're safe and loved." Sometimes, parents have to make very hard choices to protect their children. Like you made a hard choice to take care of us, even though it meant you couldn't go back to your old life. Isabella asked. Marcus was constantly amazed by how perceptive these children were. "Yes, exactly like that. But it wasn't really a hard choice for me. Taking care of you feels like the most important thing I've ever done. We love you, Daddy." Both girls said almost simultaneously. "I love you too," Marcus replied, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Later that night, after the girls were asleep in their bunk beds, Marcus sat outside on the porch looking up at the stars. The mountain sky was clearer than anything he had ever seen in the city, with thousands of points of light stretching across the darkness. He thought about how much his life had changed in just 1 week, how a simple act of kindness toward 2 frightened children had led him to discover a capacity for love and courage he never knew he possessed. The encrypted phone buzzed with a text message from Catherine. "Thank you for giving my daughters the gift of a real father. I will find a way to see them again someday, but knowing they're with you gives me peace." Marcus typed back, "They're safe and loved. That's a promise." As he sat in the quiet mountain night, Marcus realized that he was no longer the man who had gone to work at the airport 7 days ago. That man had been living a small, careful life, afraid to take risks or make commitments that might complicate his existence. This man, this father, was ready to build something bigger and more meaningful than he had ever imagined possible. Tomorrow, they would begin the process of creating their new life. They would find a house where 3 children could grow up safely, where they could have the dog and the garden and all the normal childhood experiences that Sophia and Isabella had been denied. It wouldn't be easy, and there would always be an element of danger lurking in the background, but they would face it together as a family. For the first time in years, Marcus felt truly optimistic about the future. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the backyard of their new home in a quiet suburb of Colorado Springs, watching Sophia and Isabella teach Tommy how to plant tomato seeds in the garden they had built together. The 3 children worked with the focused concentration of young farmers, their hands dark with soil and their faces bright with excitement about the vegetables they would harvest in a few months. The house was modest but perfect for their needs. A 3-bedroom ranch with a large backyard and enough space for the dog they had finally adopted from the local shelter. Buster, a golden retriever mixed with boundless energy and a gentle temperament, supervised the gardening project from his favorite spot under the apple tree. "Dad, Tommy's putting the seeds too deep," Isabella called out, using the name that had become as natural as breathing over the past months. "No, I'm not," Tommy protested. Good-naturedly, Sophia said to make the holes this deep. Marcus smiled as he walked over to inspect their work. The custody hearing for Tommy had gone better than anyone had expected, with the judge noting that the boy seemed happier and more settled than he had in years. Janet had initially been skeptical about the sudden appearance of 2 sisters in Tommy's life, but she had come to appreciate the stability and joy that the expanded family had brought to their son. "The holes look perfect to me," Marcus said, kneeling down beside the children. "And look how straight your rows are. We're going to have the best garden in the neighborhood." The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of adjustments and new routines. Marcus had found work as a maintenance supervisor at a local community college, a job that paid better than his airport position and allowed him to be home in the evenings with the children. The girls had enrolled in the neighborhood elementary school, where they quickly made friends and excelled in their studies despite all the upheaval they had experienced. Most remarkably, they had begun to heal from the trauma of their mother's disappearance and the danger they had faced. With the help of a child psychologist who specialized in trauma recovery, Sophia and Isabella had learned to process their experiences and develop coping strategies for the anxiety that sometimes surfaced. "Dad, when do you think we'll hear from Mommy again?" Sophia asked, settling back on her heels as she finished planting her row of seeds. It was a question that came up regularly, and Marcus had learned to answer it with honesty while maintaining hope. "I don't know, sweetheart. The fee. Lawyers say the investigation is still ongoing, and it's not safe for her to contact us directly. But I know she's thinking about you every day. Do you think she's proud of how we're taking care of our garden?" Isabella asked. "I think she's proud of how you're taking care of each other and how you've made Tommy feel like he's always been your brother," Marcus replied. The integration of Tommy into their family had been smoother than Marcus had dared to hope. The 7-year-old had initially been overwhelmed by suddenly having 2 sisters, but the twins had welcomed him with the same open hearts they had shown Marcus from the beginning. Within weeks, the 3 children had developed the kind of sibling bond that seemed to have existed for years. As they finished their gardening and washed their hands at the outdoor spigot, Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and saw a number he didn't recognize, which immediately put him on alert. Even though they had been living peacefully for months, he remained vigilant about potential threats to their safety. "Hello?" He answered cautiously. "Mr. Thompson, this is Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI. I have news about Catherine Delacroix." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. Agent Martinez had been their primary contact during the legal proceedings that had established their new identities and living situation. A call from her usually meant significant developments in the ongoing investigation. Is she all right? She's safe, and I have good news. The International Task Force made the final arrests in the network yesterday. The threat to your family has been officially eliminated. Marcus sank into one of the patio chairs, overwhelmed by the relief that flooded through him. Are you certain? As certain as we can be. The last of the leadership was captured in Switzerland, and they've agreed to full cooperation in exchange for reduced sentences. There's no one left with the resources or motivation to pursue Mrs. Delacroix or her daughters. What does this mean for us? It means you can reclaim your original identities if you choose to, though there's no requirement to do so. It also means that Mrs. Delacroix is free to resume contact with her daughters. Marcus looked over at Sophia and Isabella, who were now chasing Buster around the yard with Tommy, their laughter echoing across the neighborhood. Does she want to see them? She's asked me to arrange a meeting if you and the girls are comfortable. With that, she understands that a lot has changed in the past 6 months. That evening, after the children were asleep, Marcus sat in his living room trying to process the magnitude of what Agent Martinez had told him. The threat that had turned their lives upside down was finally over, but the resolution brought its own complications. Catherine Delacroix was free to reclaim her daughters, which raised questions about custody, living arrangements, and the future of the family they had built together. He had legally adopted Sophia and Isabella, but those documents had been created under emergency circumstances. Would Catherine want to reverse the adoption now that she was safe? Would the girls want to return to their mother? And what would happen to the bond the 3 children had formed? Marcus was still wrestling with these questions when his phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a number that made his breath catch in his throat. Hello, Marcus. It's Catherine. Her voice was different than he remembered, stronger and more confident, but also tinged with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. Catherine, Agent Martinez told me the investigation is over. It is. I'm free, and more importantly, the girls are safe. I can't tell you how grateful I am for everything you've done for them. They're amazing children. You should be very proud of them. I am. But I'm also aware that they've spent more time with you in the past 6 months than they had with me in the year before their lives were turned upside down. Agent Martinez tells me that you've adopted them legally. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. The circumstances were unusual. I didn't know if you would be able to reclaim them, and they needed stability. You gave them exactly what they needed. And according to their therapist, they're thriving in ways they never did when they were constantly moving between caregivers. What are you saying? Catherine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I'm saying that I think my daughters have found the father they always needed. I'm saying that maybe the best thing I can do for them is to let them keep the family they've built with you. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. You don't want them back? Of course I want them back. They're my children, and I love them more than my own life. But I also want what's best for them, and what's best for them might not be disrupting the stability they've found with you. Catherine, they miss you terribly. They ask about you every day, and I miss them every moment. But missing someone and being the best parent for them aren't always the same thing. They talked for over an hour, working through the complex emotions and practical considerations of their situation. By the end of the conversation, they had reached an agreement that surprised Marcus with its wisdom and generosity. Catherine would remain in the girls' lives, but as a beloved aunt figure, rather than their primary parent. She would visit regularly, maintain a relationship with them, and be involved in major decisions about their future. But their daily care, their stability, their sense of home would remain with Marcus and the family they had created together. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood nervously in the arrival gate at Colorado Springs Airport, holding hands with Sophia and Isabella as they waited for their mother's flight to arrive. Tommy stood beside them, curious about finally meeting the woman who had given birth to his sisters. "Are you nervous?" Marcus asked the twins. "A little," Sophia admitted. "It's been so long since we saw her." "What if she's different?" Isabella added. "What if she doesn't like our new family?" Tommy asked, voicing the concern that none of them had wanted to express. Marcus knelt down so he was at their eye level. "Your mom loves you more than anything in the world. And anyone who loves you that much is going to be happy that you've found a place where you feel safe and loved." When Catherine emerged from the jetway, Marcus almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the harried, stressed businesswoman he had imagined from their phone conversations. This Catherine looked relaxed and genuinely happy, her face lighting up the moment she spotted her daughters. The reunion was everything Marcus had hoped it would be. Sophia and Isabella ran to their mother with squeals of delight, and Catherine swept them into her arms with tears streaming down her face. But what touched Marcus most was how naturally they included Tommy in the reunion, introducing him to Catherine as their brother with obvious pride. "So you're the famous Tommy I've heard so much about," Catherine said, extending her hand to the boy. "Your sisters tell me you're an excellent big brother." "I'm actually the little brother," Tommy corrected with a grin. "But I'm really good at it." Catherine laughed, and Marcus felt some of his nervousness melt away. Over the next few days, as Catherine stayed in their guest room and participated in their daily routines, he watched her interact with the children with a mixture of maternal love and respectful distance. She was clearly thrilled to be reunited with her daughters, but she was also careful not to disrupt the family dynamics they had established. On her last evening with them, Catherine helped Marcus tuck the children into bed and then joined him on the back porch where they had shared so many conversations over the phone. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For giving my daughters something I never could. A normal childhood, a stable home, a family that puts them first." Marcus shook his head. "They're incredible kids. Any parent would be lucky to have them." "Not any parent. It takes a special kind of person to take in two traumatized children and help them heal while building a new family around them." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the suburban evening. Finally, Catherine spoke again. "I want you to know that I've restructured my entire business. I'm no longer traveling constantly, and I've moved my headquarters here to Colorado. I bought a house about 20 minutes away." Marcus looked at her in surprise. "You're moving here?" "I want to be part of their lives, but I also want to respect the family you've built. I thought maybe I could be the fun aunt who takes them on weekend adventures and spoils them at holidays." "And their father?" Catherine smiled. "Their father is the man who risked everything to keep them safe, who opened his heart and his home without asking for anything in return. Their father is you, Marcus. Biology doesn't change that." The next morning, as Catherine prepared to leave for her new home, the children gathered around her for final hugs and promises to see each other soon. "I love you, Mommy," Sophia said, using the title that would always belong to Catherine. "And I love you, sweetheart." "All of you," Catherine replied, including Tommy in her gaze. "Will you come to our school play next month?" Isabella asked. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." As Catherine's rental car disappeared down their street, Marcus felt a sense of completion that he had never experienced before. Their family was complex and unconventional, built from crisis and trauma and the simple human need for connection, but it was also strong and loving and real. "Dad," Tommy said, slipping his hand into Marcus's, "are we going to live like this forever?" Marcus looked down at his son, then at Sophia and Isabella, who were already planning their next garden project with Buster trailing behind them. "If we're lucky," he said, "we'll live like this forever." That evening, as Marcus cleaned up after dinner and listened to the three children playing in the living room, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them all together. He thought about the frightened man who had gone to work at the airport just 7 months ago, convinced that his small, careful life was all he could handle. That man could never have imagined the capacity for love and courage he would discover, or the family that would emerge from one moment of simple kindness toward 2 children in need. Sometimes the most important choices we make are the ones we don't even realize we're making at the time. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Catherine calling to say goodnight to the children, as she had promised she would every evening. "Dad, it's Aunt Catherine," Sophia called out. And Marcus smiled at how easily they had adapted to their new family structure. As he watched his 3 children take turns talking to Catherine, sharing the details of their day with excitement and love, Marcus realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not the quiet contentment he had once settled for, but the rich, complicated, occasionally chaotic joy of a life lived fully and shared generously. Outside, the Colorado sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Inside, 3 children laughed with their aunt on the phone, while their father finished the dishes and their dog dozed contentedly by the fireplace. It was an ordinary evening in an extraordinary life, and Marcus Chen Thompson couldn't imagine wanting anything more. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.